the 30th of August 2021. I'm Dana Durnford, your host, nuclearproctologist.org. You can call in 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. You got a bad fire in California, and Dana Nasana, a friend of this planet, girlfriend's house is actually very close and 1 mile away from the fire. Of course, a fire can travel a mile in just a few minutes with the right conditions, and a big fire can create its own winds. So our heart goes out to those victims and those that are worried. Hi everybody. Madame Curie, she lost both of her hands to radiation. Both of her hands. And she never lost it to plutonium or americium or neptunium or strontium or uranium fission products or something like that. She lost it to radon. So it shows you that if radon is so powerful, you can lose your hands, both of them, where you can't even wipe your own bum anymore. How bad is the other stuff, right? Now, I've done something that nobody seemed to have ever done before. Is I counted the tanks at Fukushima, and we have an absurd amount of pictures. I can't remember the exact number. I got a folder that we go through sometimes with over 300 pictures of the site, right? And probably about 50 pictures encompass the whole site. And some of them gives a clean shot of it. Now, I only counted 550 big tanks, about 100 medium tanks, and about 150 very small tanks, very tiny tanks compared to the other tanks. Now, as far as I can tell, the tanks are actually empty. The evidence, and I'm going to show it to you coming up here now, suggests that the tanks are empty. Yeah, no, and once again, I'll remind everybody to say a prayer for Dana Nasana's girlfriend and others in that community that are in harm's way of a massive fire. It's just terrifying. I can show you, I got 5 of these recent videos. YouTube is extending my videos, or the lobbyists from the nuclear industry at YouTube, I guess. So you can see it's after 12 hours. I can't download the video for 12 hours. The video shows up. It's longer than... This is a new thing. I've been doing this for years, following and checking it. Because we know you can edit the videos, but that they're doing stuff like that, editing out certain words. So you can see it's an extra 5 seconds. And on this one, it's 8 seconds. Longer video. On this one, it's 12 seconds longer. And on this one, it's 11 seconds longer. And this one, I think, was 8 seconds longer. Which is really interesting that. So if you're watching this video later and you hear something that doesn't sound right for me, you come back and check. You might see the video is longer. It's a very troubling trend because there's nobody actually does what I do when it comes to nuclear, telling you the truth and showing you the documentation. This is the Fukushima Daiichi site. And these are, now the numbers I'm using are overestimated numbers. I'm not lowballing it or something like that. Fukushima nuclear plant water to be released into the ocean via an undersea tunnel. As soon as I see that, I was like, wait a second. This is a whole new one, right? Undersea tunnel. Well, I'll tell you the story as we get to it, I guess. Okay, so let's go back to 2013. So right now they say there's 1,000 tanks. I counted the tanks. There's not 1,000 tanks on that site. And I'll show you different pictures from different angles, but there's not 1,000. There is no 1,000 tanks or even close to it. And the tanks, if they did fill it up with the numbers that we got, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts per tank of just beta. So you couldn't build an actual another tank. If one of these tanks had 1.4 million sieverts, which is a way of measuring radiation, like high numbered radiations, 5 sieverts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, out of a million is a lethal dose. 10 out of a million is a lethal dose almost right away of this kind of environment. 20 sieverts. Now we're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter, and we'll get to that. Okay, so it's supposed to have 1,000 tanks, but we can't find 1,000 tanks when you count the pictures, the tanks in the picture. We got lots of pictures. Okay, so 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. 2021, they got 1,000 tanks. Something strange going on there, isn't that? It's much worse, much more sinister, I think, than that. And the name Mari Yamaguchi, 2014. Let me go backwards. So Mari Yamaguchi, 2013. Mari Yamaguchi, 2014. In 2014, he had 1,200 tanks. 1,200. In 2014, Mari Yamaguchi again, they claimed they only got 1,000 tanks in that fall. It's okay, hang on. In 2017, Australia was reporting 900 tanks. Yeah, 900 tanks. 900 tanks in 2017. And they're showing you these Photoshop pictures. Look at him, the way he stood up there with his hands, perfect posture, his feet. Like when you walk, both feet don't stay on the ground at the same time. It actually doesn't work that way. You can't walk like that. Try walking and having both of your heels on the ground at the same time. Japan will have to dump the tanks 2019. They had 1,000 tanks. 2021, Mari Yamaguchi, again, Associate Press, they got 1,000 tanks. So 2013 was 1,000. 2014 was 900 or 1,200. 2017 was 900. 2019 was 1,000. 2021 they only had 1,000. So it hasn't changed from 2013 to 2021. This will make even more sense as we go through it for you. So let's go back. TEPCO to abandon a Rivas system amid contaminated water crisis. August 12, 2014. I'm just laying the foundation for the tunnel they're allegedly going to dig and dump radioactive water into the ocean with. I just want to, because somebody has to come out with an honest depiction of what they're actually trying to do to you. August 12, 2014. So this month, 2014. The accident happened March 11, 2011. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operation. In other words, the Rivas system was not filtering, they weren't filtering water for the most crucial period, the first 3 years, which is actually over, it's 3.5 years. So April, April 11th, April, May, June, July, August. So it was 3 years, 5 months, no filtration whatsoever. They couldn't dismantle it or dispose of the system or decontaminate the system because it's so radioactive. It'll become contaminated itself. So if I take radioactive material and put it in a pipe, radioactive liquid, and put it in the pipe is now radioactive. At these numbers we're talking about, on a bad scale, if you put fresh water through now, when it comes out the other side, it's lethal. It'll be like that forever. That's how radiation actually works. See? It contaminates everything. The radiation levels measured in the system posed a risk to the workers. There was no operation, as they told you at the beginning. It was unused. And the maintenance of the system, there's no maintenance because it's a lethal dose to be in there. They couldn't decontaminate it, right? TEPCO still facing an uphill battle when it comes to dealing with the water underneath the plant. Enormous amount of groundwater continues to flow directly into the ocean. Directly, nope, there's no tunnel, it's directly into the ocean. Utility has a limited amount of water it can store in tanks on the site. You can't store the water they're talking about because it's 2 sieverts a liter. I'll show you some of the numbers very quickly, and we'll jump into their version of the underwater tunnel. 3 months ago, TEPCO attempted to divert some of the flow of groundwater, by the way, with an underground bypass, aka like the tunnel they're trying to do now, but failed to achieve any meaningful results. In other words, for 3 years, 5 months, the most critical moments, first 3 years and 5 months of multiple nuclear meltdowns, loss of nuclear fuel pools with decades of reactor cores, like dwarfs Chernobyl. Chernobyl's brutal, but it dwarfs it. It makes Chernobyl look like a paper towel. And Chernobyl is brutal. That was brutal. Fukushima is a planet killer, but failed to achieve any meaningful results. 2013, the current Prime Minister in 2013 said it's unacceptable to have the contaminated water tanks flowing into the ocean. Of course, the tanks, we're talking about radiation numbers are so high. The numbers are so high. 2.3 billion becquerels, atomic pulses every second of cesium. 750 million pulses of other radioactive material. So they use cesium to manipulate you and distract you from the real numbers, because it's curium that's going to produce those types of numbers. And the curium fission products, you need lead shielding that's 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Plutonium's lethal on the atomic scale. Material was presented in each liter of contaminated water. Each liter. So what you're talking about is over 2.2 sieverts per liter. They're generally only acknowledged in beta, really. That's right. It's surprising that they got gamma in this one here. Okay. Now the tanks hold 1,370,000 liters per tank. Right, you got, because you can do the math, you'll get the same number anyway. So when you scale that up, that's 1.4 million sieverts per tank. So at 1.4 million sieverts per tank, you can't build another tank anywhere on site. You can't reuse the same equipment because that's the lethal doses in the equipment, etc., etc., etc. You can't filter this stuff because the minute you try to filter 2 sieverts per liter, after you get through a couple of gallons, you can no longer get in the same room. It's complete hoax, 100% hoax what they're doing to us. But it's a lethal dose for the planet. With 5,000 tons of that particular water leaking out of this one cable trench and leaking. Like 5,000 tons is not a leak. So 5,000 pickup trucks, 5,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water going into the ocean, that's not a leak. No matter how you try to spin this, that's not a leak. So imagine you're behind 5,000 trucks and you're trying to get home because your partner sent you to get a quart of milk or something. Yeah, honey, I got 5,000 trucks ahead of me. It might be a little bit late. It's a lot of trucks, right? So when they call it a leak, I like to see their heads leaking. Fukushima Nuclear plant to release into the ocean via undersea tunnel. The Japanese officials said the ocean release is the most realistic option for disposing of the radioactive water. Well, how do we know you're putting anything into the ocean when you're using a tunnel? First off, these tanks can't be filled because you can't build another tank. So these less than 700 tanks, 150 are those tiny tanks. I got another way to show this to you. Hang on. Because that's what I do around here. I beat the shit out of myself. Life is what it is. Excuse the Canadian. Okay. All right. Let's try to get this right. Okay, so I got the numbers for you. You can do the numbers yourself, right? But you see that number 100 right there? That's actually, they're actually little small tanks, right? There's 50 of them here and around 100 of them over there, right? And so you can put, say, 20 of them to 30 of them would fit in a tank. It's the same for these tanks here. So when you actually do the numbers, you're looking at less than 600 tanks on this site. But the problem is, if you filled up any of these tanks with 1.4 million sieverts, because they're only acknowledging beta, they're not talking about alpha or gamma or neutrons, which is plutonium, uranium, curium, is the biggest product of the irradiated fuel rods, by the way. So they're 100% unequivocally lying to you. All right, let's keep her going here. So now you can start to get a handle on these tanks here. I already done the numbers for you. I counted them out. They're claiming there's 1,000, but I can't find 1,000 on the site. And if you say that tank right there with my fingers to was filled up with the numbers I showed you earlier, and they're pouring water over what they're trying to do is pretend they didn't poison the ocean, see? So they put all these tanks there, they're bolted together, which is not leak proof, see? So if you actually filled it up, you can't get back on the site. If you say you built these tanks and then you started to fill them up after, which is not what they've done, then once you fill up the first tank, you can't hook up the other tanks and you can't get back on the site. Because this is gamma, shine, alpha, neutron bursts and everything else. That's how that actually works. This is why a nuclear meltdown is so. This is why they're not at Chernobyl, you know. This is why they're not at Santa Susana, which, by the way, was 460 times worse than 3 Mile Island. So when you look at these tanks, that's proof that the tanks are empty. Because if each of these tanks were full of 2.2 sieverts per hour per liter, with 1.4 million sieverts per tank, then when you 1.4 million, 2.8 million sieverts, these are absurd numbers. These are lethal. Just one tank is lethal for the whole site because of the gamma shot. And the tanks are not thick enough to shield you from that effect, by the way. So these tanks are unequivocally empty. It's all dumped into the ocean. This is why we done research expeditions. By the way, I'm back, obviously. And the weather went nuts when I was out there. And I got brutal arthritis on top of that. And so the fall is here. We don't really get a fall, we get winter, basically. We have summer, and then, which is very, very late, and then we get winter. And so I was just beaten. I wasn't going to do a video tonight. I felt I needed like 7 weeks to recover from this experience. I'm going to try to head back out on the ocean and do species count. Like, all the spiders are missing from the forest here and in Nova Scotia, because we talked to a researcher from Nova Scotia when I was out on the expedition, the last time. But I'll get into that. I'll cover, we still got footage from the last expedition too, right? Where I ended up coming home because they took down my main site YouTube channel with 24,000 subscribers a few weeks back in order to silence me, because I guess they're getting desperate. The truth is really easy to tell. See, what I do is easy. It's telling the truth. That's not very hard to do at all. You know what I mean? The truth, and I provide the documentation as I'm telling the truth. And yeah, and Timo Ori argues, how are they going to dig a tunnel through a radioactive ground, which I was going to get to coming up, because the buildings detonated and threw fuel rods all over the site. They used bulldozers to come in and bury it on the spot, which remote control bulldozers or homeless, who knows. You can't actually... Now, the tunnel is going to be dug by Reactor 5. I'll get to it. We're getting to it. The operator direct Fukushima Nuclear Power Plant through Wednesday plans to build an undersea tunnel so that massive amounts... Well, the tunnel is going to be 1 kilometer. And if the tanks are full, it's enough to fill up a 1 kilometer tank 8,000 times, almost 9,000 times, 8,700 times. It's a 6-foot wide tunnel, right? So you're looking at, you can fill up that 1 kilometer tunnel 9,000 times almost, 8,700 times. The massive amount of it's not treated, you can't treat it, as I showed you earlier. But still radioactive water, they've been doing this now for many years, calling it tritiated water. They've done the same thing for 3 Mile Island, by the way. Can be released into the ocean less than a mile away from the plant. It's actually a kilometer, to avoid interference with local fishing. As if it's just going to go disappear into the ocean. First off, there is no tanks. The tanks are actually empty. An official, which did in charge of the water discharge project, water. This is not water. First off, there's nothing to discharge. You couldn't get back on the site if you try to contain the water on the site. CETEPCO will construct the undersea tunnel by drilling through bedrock in the sea near the number 5 reactor, which is separated from 1, 2, 3, and 4. But reactor 6 right alongside of it appears to have had a meltdown, and the pictures of it that they released in January of this year were all redacted for some reason, which survived a meltdown at the plant, which we can't confirm. Like, so when they said the plant number 5 and 6 and 4 reactor were shut down and the fuel was unloaded. They don't actually unload all the fuel. They only take out some of the fuel. And if you don't keep water there, it'll melt down. So it's highly probable that it melted down, which survived the meltdowns at the plant to minimize possible underground contamination or leakage of groundwater into the tunnel. This again is Mari Yamaguchi. Put that picture there to make her look like she's human for some reason. Increasing amounts of radioactive water have been stored in about 1,000 tanks at the Fukushima plant since 2011. As I showed you, in 2013 they had 1,000 tanks. 2014 they had 1,200 tanks. 2017 they had 900 tanks. 2020 they had 1,000 tanks. 2021 they had 1,000 tanks. And we counted the tanks, and there's only about 650. But this is the line they're sticking to it. See, the plant says, really, the plant? A plant can speak? Give us the name. It says the tanks will reach their capacity late next year. It's going to take another 40 years, 50, 60 years to decommission the site. So the solution they claim would be to dump it all into the ocean. But the problem being is that if you fill the tank up with the numbers that we have, the actual real numbers, you can't get back on the site. And you can't build another tank alongside one of the tanks if you fill them up. So therefore the tanks can't be full. And that would explain why we have a dead Pacific Ocean now, see? And the Atlantic is dying. The government decided in April to start discharging, and you'll see coming up what I mean by that, discharging water after further treatment dilution to the Pacific Ocean in spring 2023. Under safety standards set by regulators. Of course, the regulators were captured a long time ago by the industry. There is no regulators. These are not even subhumans. These are the most heartless, soulless, spineless, coward creatures we've ever come across in the history of monsters. They dwarf all monsters. There is no regulator. It's absurd to suggest it is. It's an abomination to suggest there is. It's a blatant lie to even pretend. I only serve one king says, I checked into how many spiders in a forest, and this is the answer. There would equal about 3.5 million spiders per acre. And the same study found, on average, about 140 spiders per square meter across a range of habitats, which is only about 570,000 spiders per acre. And I've made 5 trips this year into the forest and camped out and covered 450 kilometers, and we only found 3 spider webs. The first one was attached to rocks. The next one was over a small creek. Right? The spiders are gone. They were exterminated. And spiders bioaccumulate radiation 1,000% more than surrounding background is producing, because they're bioaccumulating it by eating all the other insects, right? Great catch. Thank you for that. Yeah, they're the canary in the coal mine. Is an attempt to minimize the reputational damage. The offshore discharge using a pipeline enclosed inside a cement tunnel is an attempt to minimize the reputational damage. Well, first off, you can see a study over there. This is France's model here, and there's another study over there. There's France's model of the radioactive fallout. So this is the Atlantic, and that's the Pacific. We've done 6 years of research expeditions to Alaska for 4 to 5 months a year, doing species counts. It was exterminated. And we're currently doing species counts here in the Atlantic, and we got the same thing. The study over there, 360 atoms of the radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs inhaled by Californians after Fukushima, is just one of many studies we got quantifying that there was an absurd amount showed up in North America, but the models suggested it wouldn't. The models are only based on venting. They're not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns in their inventories. Fukushima radioactive water to be released offshore via tunnels. And an online meeting started to secure consumers' trust in the food produced from the northeastern prefectures. Now, you don't want to eat anything from anywhere in Japan. They're shipping it to other prefectures, relabeling it, and then shipping it in other countries. You don't want to eat anything from Japan. or countries that support Japan. This is not a game. This is life or death. You eat that stuff, you can have leukemia next week. At an online meeting Saturday to secure consumers' trust in food products from the northeastern prefectures, in other words, to trick you, manipulate you, and deceive you, and coerce you into eating radioactive, lethal food and feeding it to your loved ones. The meeting was held on the planned release of treated, again they used this word, treated water. And we got the documentation shows that it can't be done. To the sea from Tokyo Electric Power Company. And Tokyo is an electric power company, not a decommissioning company. Even though they started up a company, that they went bankrupt right away and were nationalized by the Japanese government. So they don't even exist, only in fiction and paper. At the meeting, the government explained its measure to prevent damage to local industries over the water releases, including a temporary program to use state funds to purchase the Fukushima fishery products if their consumption slumps, and to freeze it and then sell it later. They're intent on murdering most of the planet, or whoever's stupid enough to buy their product. Japan is a very sick country. It's murdering their own, and it's trying to murder everybody else. This is the nuclear industry, by the way, at the backbone of all of this. This coward, despicable, maniacal, omnicide industry. We'll take necessary measures flexibly, State Minister of the Economy, Trade and Industry, who knows nothing about nuclear, says. And the head of the prefecture's fisheries associations expressed opposition to the release of the treated water. Again, they use this word, treated water. And they all do it. They're all regurgitating that same narrative. It still contains radioactive tritium. Of course, the entire planet was covered in many different fission products. I showed you one of the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. Here's the tritium, or the xenon. Xenon will actually burn a hole, 133, will burn a hole through your lung, and then it'll sequester in your bone and start mutating your stem cells, like in your pelvis, right? Not only that, it'll sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your body is under siege the entire time. Okay, so this is another model of the radioactive fallout covered in the northern hemisphere. Are you more worried about the alleged tritium, or are you going to be worried about what's already happened? Because this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make you think that they got it under control. It's not going to happen when it's already happened. Fukushima nuclear water to be released via undersea tunnel. And this is, they show you this depiction of a temporary Prime Minister Suga in a Korean protest, in order to make you think that they don't agree with it. The Washington Post. Increasing amounts of radioactive water have been stored in about 1,000 tanks. Again, at the beginning, I showed you there was 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,200 tanks in 2014, 900 tanks in 2017, 1,000 tanks in 2020, 1,000 tanks in 2021. So obviously they're not filling tanks up since 2013. And if you were filling tanks up, you couldn't get back on the site because you're talking about 1.4 million liters per tank, which translates, like on the low end, to 1.4 million sieverts per tank, rather. Attempt to minimize the reputational damage. Starting to seem the same narrative in all of these stories, by the way. The water will be released at a depth of about 12 meters, 40 feet below the ocean surface. Well, 1 kilometer offshore is not 40 feet deep. It's way deeper than that. It's hundreds and hundreds of feet deep. So 40 feet below the ocean surface. Like, first off, you're going to build a secretive tunnel that nobody can see, And you're allegedly going to empty water. Like, so if I fill up the tank with radioactive water, and let's just say that this could work, and then I put that water through a filtration system. Okay, now that has to go into a brand new tank. If I put it back in the original tank, which had over 1 million sieverts in it, that's instantly 1 million sieverts again. Because the tank is so radioactive, you can put water through the tank for 1,000 years, and the water coming out the other side of the tank is going to be lethal doses. So just pouring water in, having water run out, the clean water that went in will come out the other end of the tank a few minutes later, highly radioactive. You can't use the tank again. So you got to filter it before it goes in the tank. But you can't filter it because the filter becomes so radioactive after a couple of minutes, you can't change the filter. And not only that, once the filter is radioactive, all the water that's going through it becomes more radioactive. So if you start filtering it, you got 2 sieverts per liter, then it's 4 sieverts after the second liter, blah, 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 right? All of a sudden, you're putting in 2 sieverts, but it's coming out 100 sieverts per liter on the other side. Because that's how, you can't filter radiation. It's not something that's neutral. It's not like you're using a charcoal filter to pick up, or like, you know how you filter water for community water reclamation centers, and they have big filtrations to filter out the sediment out of the water. And then they put chemicals in the water that comes out the other side. Right, that works, but it's not 100% filtration either. But radioactive material, you can't filter radioactive material, and anybody that says they can filter it has no documentation that they can. There's no actual documentation. Or we would have seen this trick a long time ago, right? They'd be doing it everywhere, not just Fukushima. It's a complete fable to try, because they know the oceans are dying, and they're trying to pretend they didn't kill the ocean, but at the same time, they're willing to murder you with radioactive food. They're shipping out 850 million pounds a year of just rice from that Fukushima prefecture. We used to be the breadbasket of the Asian countries, not just Japan, but the Asian countries. And so this nuclear industry, I don't know why I call it a nuclear industry, this nuclear lobbyist machine, despicable nuclear lobbyist machine that portrays itself as an industry, it's a genocide death cult. These are cancer factories. These are disease factories. These are not, they don't have any redeeming attributes whatsoever. It's safer than simply laying a pipe under the seafloor in the event of an earthquake or tsunami. Listen, an earthquake or tsunami don't give a shit if it's a pipe or in cement. It's irrelevant. An earthquake, it'll snap that the exact same way. It's irrelevant. To suggest that putting it in cement is going to stop an earthquake from breaking it in a country with 5,000 earthquakes a year, in an area that's on the actual fault line itself, is absurd. The tanks are empty, see? So they just come up with these fables. All the media comes out and regurgitates the fable, and everybody's supposed to accept the fable. TEPCO plans to dilute the contaminated water, large amounts of seawater. You can't dilute radioactive materials. All you're doing is spreading it. It works this way. If I have a bathtub of water, and I take a cup of radioactive water and put it in the bathtub of water, I now got a bathtub of radioactive water. You can't dilute it. It doesn't work that way. You just spread it. Not only that, all the water becomes radioactive because the radiation is actually pulsing energy at the speed of light. Diluting it is not going to change it. You're just making it worse. Like, Japan doesn't have a right to destroy Earth. It doesn't have a right. The nuclear industry doesn't have a right to poison the oceans. They're getting away with it because people are, the industry, it's a hidden industry, it's a cult, but it's a death cult. and people are not able to articulate the issues, right? Which is where I come in. And that makes me a target. Yeah? I'm surprised I haven't been assassinated yet, and I suspect that's coming, right? But the point is, I don't have a right to go away when we don't have anybody to replace me. And I'm not going to be driven away or coward and give up. TEPCO plans to dilute the contaminated water with large amounts of seawater to reduce the concentrations. This is voodoo science. Japan has obtained the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is part of a corporation known as UN, which is just a corporation. It's a corporation. There's no sovereignty anywhere on the planet whatsoever. Agreement to cooperate in the water sampling. Oh, so Japan now is going to cooperate. Of course they're not. They wouldn't let anybody sample the tanks because the tanks are empty. We've covered this many times already. And will continue for about 30 years or until the plant's decommissioning ends. Will continue for 30 years. It's going to continue for at least 10,000 years. You can't decommission a nuclear meltdown. It doesn't work that way. And you're only using homeless and destitute and victims of society and immigrants who don't speak the language. Harvard University, Yale University, Stanford University, Oxford University, MIT University, all the shakers and movers. I've scrutinized every one of them. None of them ever went to Fukushima, by the way. No nuclear scientists have ever went to Fukushima. No nuclear academics have ever went to Fukushima Nuclear Meltdown site. TEPCO says the plans to apply to the Nuclear Regulation Authority, which is a captured regulator, for a safety review of the tunnel plan after gaining support from local fishermen and other residents. Again, they simply couldn't care. TEPCO doesn't exist. It's nationalized. It's actually the Japanese government, which has been captured by the industries. The captured government on Tuesday adopted an interim plan that includes a fund to cushion the impact of negative reports, hush money, about the discharge and compensate fisheries and other local businesses for any damage. Literally, one of the most evilest things imaginable is what you're looking at in that depiction right there. That's literally one of the most evilest things imaginable that they're going about. This is the nuclear lobbyists. This is the World Nuclear Association and other scum, degenerate cowards like that. Yeah, Riverbend Nuclear Power Station was almost in the path of Hurricane Ida. There's actually two nuclear. I'm planning on covering that in the next show. I was going to cover it tonight, but we haven't got any updates from that area yet. And this story has to be covered immediately to counter, because it's just broke, right? And as far as I'm concerned, one of the nuclear power plants that was hit, they were both hit extreme by Hurricane Ida, came ashore at, now, I'll just talk about it for a second, but I'll cover it in big detail the next show. Hurricane Ida came ashore at 150 miles per hour. Now, it didn't, 155. Now, if it came ashore at 156, it would kick in all kinds of funding from the federal government. Now, anybody knows anything about wind gusts? If the wind is blown at 150 sustained, which they admit it was, it's going to be well over 200 to 225 mile per hour gusts. Like we're talking 150 miles per hour. So they kept the numbers below what they really were. They acknowledged it was at least 150 miles per hour, which was category 4. But a gust would have been well over 200 miles per hour. But an extra 6 miles per hour was a category 5. And they refused to call it a category 5. We've seen them do this multiple times. These storms are created because the Fukushima radioactive fallout is saturated the oceans, and the oceans are pulsing energy every second. They're heated up, and so when these hurricanes go over this incredible hot ocean, I'm going to cover that in the next show. Have said that the ocean release is the most realistic option for disposing of the water. Japanese officials, and they don't give us a name, of course. Japanese degenerate cowards. Government and TEPCO, which are the same. Officials says tritium, which is not harmful. Of course, tritium is used in nuclear bombs, for goodness sakes. In fact, tritium is so powerful, it increases the yield of the nuclear weapons. It doubles the yield, the explosiveness of the nuclear weapons. Tritium does. And so every 11 years, they have to replace a large percentage of the tritium in nuclear bombs because it decays to another isotope, a large percentage of it, right? Now, when they say it's not harmful, and they're trying to convince everybody that the only isotope left in water poured over a nuclear meltdown, they're claiming they got it all pumped back up and it all gone through a filter and it's all sitting in a tank and none of it's gone into the ocean. That's the new story for the last 3 or 4 years. And so now they led up to this stage where nothing else happened, only the tanks. There's no releases anywhere on the planet, only in the future if they have a tunnel. This is what they're trying to convince. The nuclear industry obviously wrote up this fictional fable, but all the other isotopes, selective treatment can be reduced to safe levels for release. You simply can't filter radioactive water. You can filter it, but you can't change the filter, and the filter becomes now lethal, and every bit of water goes through it is more radioactive when it comes out the other side than when you put it through in the first place. That's how radiation works. By Mari Yamaguchi. And so Washington Post, now, and I showed you earlier, right, 2013, 2014, to Mari Yamaguchi. She's the puppet. She might not even be a real figure, but she's the puppet. This is another model of the xenon radioactive fallout. This is the Atlantic Ocean. Over there is the Pacific Ocean. So you better start worrying about what's happened. You better start thinking about the reality. You better start appreciating the fact that you have this one source. This is the one spot on the planet where I'm going to show you the documentation. Not so you can make up your own mind, because I don't give a shit if you make up your own mind. I'm showing you the documentation so you can be educated. Because if you don't believe me, there's something actually wrong with you. You're missing chromosomes or DNA or something. And the fact that this is such an important subject, this is the most important subject in human history. This is an extinction event. And people are splitting hairs about whether they should support me. And so I have no support in the context of I don't have enough support, I should say. My apologies. I have a little bit of support, barely enough to keep the operation functional, thank goodness, and with incredible gratitude. But in utter desperation, right, there should be 1,000 people like me doing what I'm doing. And because there's not, I should be empowered to go to war for this planet. There should be 12 foundations lined up throwing money at me so I can build an operation to push back against these absurd lies, this incredible betrayal, this disgusting, despicable nuclear death cult that is exterminating everything good and the future of everybody and all species. It's simply absurd that I don't have the support. And, you know, I'll explain it to you in a second. Come on. Undersea tunnel to release Fukushima water again. Look, the West Australian. So what you're seeing is most of the media is regurgitating Associated Press's Mari Yamaguchi's version. Yeah? So everybody worldwide is getting the same paragraphs from the same authors, the same pictures at the same time, having the same conversation, except for you. You're here. You're getting this incredible diversity you are simply never going to get ever in history anywhere else. Past, present, and future. You're never going to get, because I am actually dedicated to the truth. That's what I do. And I do the research. And we see an extinction event. Not maybe, not almost, not perhaps, but it's an omnicide. It's exterminating all species, not just humans. And I got little support, such little support, that I got to go out on expeditions with not enough money sometimes to even come back home. Because we're limited to the good weather, and I got to go, otherwise we can't get it done. Now we're in fall with rough weather. I got to get out and check the seabird colonies before they migrate out of here to see if they actually exist in the first place anymore. Last year showed us they don't even exist. We got to get out again this year and try to confirm it, even though I got an old boat with old motors that I shouldn't even be on the ocean with, that I can't even get, right, you know what I'm saying? I got to watch every penny that I spend, because if I waste a penny, I'm going to regret it. I don't have enough to cover the expenses. And it's simply not, the world will look back on this day and this event in shame that I wasn't able to go to war for everybody and all the species. Undersea tunnel released Fukushima water, stored in about 1,000 tanks. Let me show you these pictures. Now I showed you the pictures earlier. There is not 1,000 tanks. Undersea tunnel, the West Australia. Now this story here, thumbs down for Durnford, which is me, is a gross attack on environmentalists. This story is written by a forensic investigative journalist named Yoshi Sumatsu, who I'd done a radio show with for about 2 years. And he was the ex-editor of the Japan Times, the Sunday's editions. Retired. So he talks about when I got arrested in convicted in 2016. I couldn't get a lawyer. I went through 16 lawyers, wouldn't take my case. They brought in a hangman's judge and he shanghaied me. Wednesday, the 21st of September 2016, goes down as the darkest hour, a total eclipse for justice in Canada and the environmental cause throughout the Northern Hemisphere. And the guilty verdict against Dana Durnford is a perversion of legal norms that condemns the Canadian government to being the great banana republic of the North, enslaves servitude to the global nuclear industry and its own uranium mining profiteers. And the greatest beneficiary of this hideous court decision are the Japanese investors in Canadian uranium and nuclear, including TEPCO and Hitachi General Electric, which are the very source of the radioactive death curse of the western coast and in the atmosphere of the North America and across the Arctic regions. And what Yoshi done was, I had got convicted of a trumped up charge meant to silence me, and there was 1,600 medias came out and attacked me. And it worked, right? They denigrated my reputation worldwide, and I was ostracized, and the investors pulled away from me. But I'm not allowed to quit. The moral compass says I can't quit. I'm not allowed to quit. If you haven't read that story, the links are below this video to that story. And Yoshi Sumatsu, of course, was the ex-editor of the Japanese Times, the Sunday edition, the equivalent to CBC or CBC in Canada or the BBC in the United States. And he came out in defense of me, and he wrote about the people that had shanghaied me and smeared me and waylaid me. But his last paragraph, he made a very strong statement for me. I encourage people to read that if you're interested in understanding some of the things I've already done and how the truth is. The truth is about me is that I've gone to war for this planet through thick and thin. I've washed up under rocks and hurricanes. I've been victimized and vilified and demonized and smeared all day, every day. And I get up and I go to war every day for everybody. And I do it on literally nothing. I can't even pay the bills, but somehow we manage to keep the operation afloat. This is not a game. It's simply not a game. I'm begging this planet to support me, but I can't do it anymore because it's humiliating. The Japanese government, but if you go read that article and you want to know why I got arrested and who had me arrested, you should read the entire article, particularly the entire article. And don't forget to read the last paragraph where he sums it up. What you realize is I'm actually a good person. Japanese government plans fund to buy Fukushima fish after cooling water. Cooling water. Notice how he downplayed, he called it water or cooling water. It's creating a fund to assist fishermen in Fukushima and other prefectures whose products are at risk of reputational damage. Reputational damage. Like, you people who write that, you don't have a right to be on this planet with us, let alone you bizarre creatures. You're just bizarre creatures. Let me show you something. They have 150,000 sites where originally of bags they picked up. And they're growing food right alongside the bags of radiation. And this picture is from the newspaper complaining that people are saying the food could be radioactive. If you're growing food in a place that was so radioactive you picked up 30 million one-ton bags that we know about, and bags that are only meant to last 1 or 2 years, by the way, and then you're going to grow food right alongside of it and harvest it right alongside of it, and then, like, people like that, there should be snipers shooting these people. If you're going to dress like that to grow food in a nuclear wasteland, you should be put in jail for the rest of your life. When you got 30 million one-ton bags and you're saying that people are unfoundly accusing you of having radiation food, you cannot grow food without it being radioactive anywhere in the 14 prefectures, Tokyo, all the way to the northernmost prefectures of Fukushima, all 14 prefectures. In fact, it's all the way to Osaka, all the way to Hiroshima. Incredible numbers, and I've showed this. Unfortunately, they took down my main site. I'm going to have to do it all again. But there's 150,000 sites like this throughout the prefectures where they picked up radiation. The smart, and moral, and ethical thing to do is not eat anything from Japan. From anywhere in Japan, or any country that's friendly with Japan. And Japan and the nuclear industry are lunatics to grow food in that environment. They're actually lunatics. They're actually insane. And I put out a video a couple of weeks ago about Japanese food. If you're not familiar, you go back to my videos a couple of weeks, you'll see a video about Japanese food. That'll get your brain in second gear. Is anybody stupid enough to eat the food from there willingly? See all those tarps back there? That's radioactive bags. Like, it's actually absurd how much we're talking about. You abandon all these communities, but you're growing food there. The communities are surrounded by millions and millions of one-ton bags, but you're growing food there. Every time it rains in Japan, every time you have a typhoon or something like that in Japan, or snow, everything gets washed out into the ocean. It was endless hemorrhaging into the ocean. It's still melting down. It's still hemorrhaging into the environment from the China syndromes under the planet. They put 3,000 Geiger counters in one community that don't even work. 3,000. To trick the population into staying there. They gave 80,000 children dosimeters that the parents can't read, or the children. Only the universities can read. Studied them like lab rats. Instead of evacuating them, they tricked them and deceived and manipulated them and poisoned them and murdered them in increments. Fukushima Nuclear plant to construct undersea tunnel to release 1 million tons of treated water. Like, if you've got 1 million tons, there's not treated water. You can't treat radioactive water. And if you fill up these tanks at 0.2 sieverts per liter, then you can't ever get back anywhere within a football field of that tank. You can't build other tanks there. If you got multiple tanks there and then you fill them all up, you can't get back within 20 miles of that site without getting brutal doses. Not only that, the tanks can create their own chain reaction, their own criticalities. Because all this fuel that's in the water will settle to the bottom of the tanks. They come in contact with each other. They'll start their own chain reaction. They'll burn a hole through the tank itself, and they'll hemorrhage down into the earth in their own China syndrome. The Fukushima plant chief decommissioning officer, Akira Ono, scum degenerate monster, stated that the officials are ready to dispel concern held by people involved in the fisheries and other industries. And TEPCO said, which doesn't exist, is nationalized. The Japanese government has said it will only proceed with the release of the move passes inspection by the Captured Atomic Energy Agency, which has previously defended the plan, but is full of goblins. That they're a corporation, by the way. They don't have any sovereignty. They're not they're not elected, they're appointed. Why don't this planet fight back? I don't get it. I don't understand why the planet don't fight back. God bless all of you folks. Look, I'm aware. I've been covering it for years. I can't switch it off. I can't. How do you switch off what I've done, all the research expeditions I've done, the actual extinction events documented, that you can find it at my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. How can you switch that off, see? I go out there now this year 5 times and beat the daylights out of myself, but there's no spiders out there. There's no flocks of birds flying. There's no fish jumping in hundreds and hundreds of ponds. No birds. This year there was actually a bird visit my campsite. I got a video to prove it on top of that. That was amazing. A bird visited my campsite. It's not words you should ever hear, that you're amazed that a bird visits your campsite. But last year nothing visited our campsite. And this year was just a gray robin. It was so hungry, it actually come up and took a piece of cheese out of my hands. Out in the wild. China urges Japan to revoke decision to dump nuclear wastewater via undersea tunnel. Now China knows better. So does South Korea. They know what I'm saying. There's no way they don't. They're not stupid. China knows what I'm saying is true. The decision to release contaminated water only shows that Japan lacks the basic sincerity, understanding, and the concern of all parties. So they're trying to convince you that it might happen, not that it's already taken place. This is what that's actually all about. Because China is proliferating nuclear, right? And Seoul summoned Japanese diplomat over plan to dump water from the nuclear power plant. It's impossible for Seoul not to know what I know. There's 1 million people out there smarter than I am. There's 5 million, 10 million, 100 million people smarter than me at this topic. Probably more. And they sit there in silence. In fact, not a single academic from a single discipline has come out and endorsed me or the documentation, or even acknowledged that when I have shown to be fact is fact. Nothing. It's just like I came to a different planet, woke up one day and I'm on this planet where everybody in the academic world are morons. But apparently it's been going on for a long time. What it is their children got the job, and their children got the job, generations, 75 years of generations of idiots having children, scumbags having children, public relation firms having children, and now the current generation feels that they're entitled to wreck and destroy and annihilate all species. Government to protect the fish industry from misinformation. Well, here's TEPCO's model of the radioactive releases of americium, radioactive fallout americium covering the northern hemisphere. This data is from TEPCO. Government to protect the fish industry from misinformation. I hope Millie found my site. I know she's out there somewhere. I'm sure she would have found us by now. I haven't seen her in the comments sections, though. When they took down my site a few weeks ago, they got rid of a lot of people that really made this work, right? We liked having all of you folks here. So as soon as they took down my site, I had to pack up. I was 450 kilometers away in the woods on an expedition, on a quad, camping out, and the trailer and all the equipment, doing a species count. I had to travel 450 kilometers to get back home, start another YouTube channel, start putting out videos so people can find me again to try to salvage this year. And so far we flopped, right? And so now I'm going to attempt to go out on the ocean with I won't get the part for the engine that I need until the first week of September the 7th or 8th or something like that. Hopefully that solves the issue. But the engine should be okay. I just can't go at a high speed. And I got to get the kicker into the shop and get the kit put into it for the water pump. And I'm running on empty the whole time. I'm just running on nickels and dimes. And I don't know how to quit. It's nuts. I actually don't know how to quit, see? I'm not capable. I'm not capable of stopping. It's bizarre in one sense because I take a beating every single day. Every time I try to do something, I got to beg for scraps just to keep the operation afloat. And I should be able to go out and buy a brand new engine. When I need an engine, I should be able to go out and buy it because the work I'm doing demands that. I'm out on an old 500cc quad. Can barely pull the trailer because that's all we can afford. I got that cheap, and then we had to spend a couple of $1,000 to get it to work proper. It's torture. The definition of torture is doing what I'm doing. That's torture. I wouldn't have it any other way, mind you, but it's torture. It's actually torture because we're losing all the species. We're being poisoned, exterminated, snuffed out, and it's not acceptable. It's not, and it's just perpetual lies. It's despicable. It's not tenable to have a system that does what it's doing right now. We can't have a future. Nobody can have a future when they're doing what they're doing. If the population understood what was going on, they'd all get dropped right wherever they're to. The entire planet would pick up a baseball bat and go hunt them down and exterminate them. Everything in the nuclear industry is revolting. They're despicable. They don't have a right to breathe the air we're breathing. They don't have a right to be in the same communities as us. All nuclear academics should have their children taken away from them, and they should be sent to Fukushima Nuclear Meltdown. Japan's government plans to support the country's fisheries industries if it is affected by misinformation. No, the misinformation is the industry. The misinformation is what they're doing. How dare you say that the truth is misinformation, you despicable cowards. You gross, despicable malformations of humans. It is affected by, if it is affected by misinformation, which is all you ever do. That's what you disgusting parasites do for a living, is misinformation. You're horrible creatures. You're not humans. Don't ever call yourself humans. Don't ever denigrate the rest of us who work and do their job every day that's moral, while you are out there stabbing everybody and all the creatures in the face. A panel that includes relevant cabinet ministers. Decided on Tuesday, relevant cabinet ministers. What kind of description is that? What kind of bizarre... They don't want to name somebody, right? And then relevant cabinet ministers. A panel that includes relevant cabinet ministers. What a bizarre connotation. Decided on Tuesday to set up a funding case demand for domestic marine products decline in response to the release. I can't see it declining because you got the whole planet brainwashed, like going around little zombies going around. They're going to dump tritium in the ocean. It's going to be okay because it's harmless. I read it. Mari Yamaguchi told me so. Mari Yamaguchi will be in jail for the rest of her life in the near future. And if the truth comes out, Mari Yamaguchi will be dealt with by this planet in the near future. Horrific scumbags. The fund will temporarily be used to buy and store marine products that can be frozen. Think about it. Now, who they got to worry about? Who specifically are they worried about? There is no opposition. It's you that are watching this with the moral compass, the honest ones that are watching this, and support what we're doing here. Because I can't do it without you. And then who's unfortunately the easy target for this industry? Because I give my phone number. It's not very hard to find me. You got my name, you got my website. I don't hide away from anybody. I'm well known. I've been known for a very long time. Long before Fukushima happened, by the way. Store marine products that can be frozen. And the government will introduce new clients, or help with advertising and securing sale routes for products that cannot be frozen. They'll murder everything. And you won't give it a second thought because there's no opposition. No opposition is allowed to exist. If a foundation had supported me, they wouldn't be writing these stories. I would be able to come out and counter them right away. It's outrageous. It's outrageous that I can't come out and deal with these scumbags, because I can guarantee you I can build an operation in very short order. If I had proper funding, I can have a network up and running in a matter of a few weeks that would come out and destroy their narratives every time they come out like that. We would wreck them in less than 1 year. We would change the planet's future, the course of everybody's future and the species' future, that we were able to change, that weren't already exterminated or being exterminated. We can change the future. Securing sales routes for products that cannot be frozen. Water contaminated. Again, suggesting that tritium is the only thing they got to worry about. Whenever I hear that, I want to grab them and tear their face right off their heads. I mean, that's what the population of the planet wants to do with them when he finds out, is tear their face right off their heads. People that say that the only thing you got to worry about is tritium from from Fukushima, that's pure brainwashing, and it's a dangerous thing to do. The most dangerous thing we can do is mislead the population in this topic. This is not a game, for God's sakes. There's no spiders out in the woods. There's no flocks of birds flying anymore. All the whales are showing up emaciated all over the friggin' planet. Oh, it wasn't Fukushima. We got it all stored in a tank. We'll put you in a tank one of these days. Has been treated and stored in tanks. So all the media is willing to come out and cut your throat. They won't physically do it, but they'll brainwash everybody around you so you can't have a conversation. You need someone like me to counter these lies. That's all it is. It's not very hard. The truth will counter it. The truth will grow right away. Then the truth becomes viral. Then the bottom falls out of the nuclear industry. Then there's Nuremberg trials, and we hang them all. Like any nuclear academic that didn't speak out should either go to jail for life or be hung. This is reasonable. They knew what was happening. There's millions of people smarter than me. Those who knew and didn't speak up should be prosecuted. The water will be diluted to levels below national regulations. The national regulations were created by the lobbyists. There is no safe levels of radioactive water. Period. By having the system in place, the government hopes to be able to respond flexibly to any reputational damage. So it's okay. Just let you murder everybody. Nobody's allowed to come out and say, hey, what about this or what about that? What kind of delusional sacks of shit are you people anyway? Well, you're not people, are you? And you are delusional. You're lunatics. You're lunatics. If such efforts are insufficient, the government plans to instruct the plant operator, which is nationalised, to compensate in accordance with the damage. And of course, they got unlimited money because they own this tax money you're talking about, because it's nationalised. Chief Cabinet Secretary Kato Katsunobu said in a meeting that the International Atomic Energy Agency has agreed to start implementing a project to monitor and review the safety of the discharge of the treated water. Well, you got to decontaminate the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. You contaminated all of that brutally, and not with tritium. What a revolting, despicable, coward industry. Cato said it would be conducted on a strict, transparent, and information will be conveyed to the global community from an objective viewpoint. The only way that's going to happen is if some foundation or some wealthy person supports me so that I can come out and bludgeon the entire industry in short order. And things will happen. And this madness will stop. The minute that the world comes to its senses and empowers me to come out and fight back, because I'm fighting back, I'm doing everything I can, but it's hard to do everything that's possible when you have very little to do. I've been at this for a long time. I typically do 5 shows a week if I'm not doing expeditions, for goodness sakes. The idea is to educate the population so there's 1 million people articulated like I am. That didn't happen, unfortunately, but it can. And the good thing about all of it is that you get better and better and better at telling the story and documentation. Hello, Dana. This despicable weirdo from Japan that's been stalking me for about 4 years. Now, see, the last time he called me with an Australian number, and this time he called me from a Chicago number. He said that although in exchange of various views, he had also heard concerns about the reputational damage. Listen, reputational damage, you had multiple nuclear meltdowns that contaminated the entire planet with radioactive fallout. And Ground Zero, Japan, is not fit to eat. They had over 850,000 excess cancers just in 2012. And cancer is only one of 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that'll show up. There's heart problems and liver problems and lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. There's autism and Down syndrome, diabetes and dementia. There's 1,800 illnesses will show up before cancer because your immune system's compromised. You're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. Cato said to be conducted on like that person there. We will have Nuremberg trials for the fricker that was calling me because he's from the Tokyo Bureau, Japanese embassy in Chicago. He said that although in exchange of various views, he had also heard concerns about reputational damage. So he keeps saying that key connotation of reputational damage, misinformation. He said, first of all, though, efforts must be made to ensure that misinformation does not emerge, that there's no dissenting opinions whatsoever, that their version is the only version. You know what that's called? That's called hell. When you can't have an open debate, you have lost hope for all species. We have lost hope for all species. We need to restore that. This world needs to empower me to go to war for you. You can go to war. I'll be happy to sit back and do jack shit, okay? I'll be happy just to sit back and watch you go to war. Go for it. Or support me so I can go do it. I don't give a shit. But let's get busy. Time's a wasting. We've lost precious time. This is an extinction event. The documentation clearly shows it. I'm tired of playing games. Let's empower me so I can get to war. Through efforts must be made to ensure that misinformation does not emerge. Gee, I wonder what efforts that is. He added, if it does, and if it does, a climate should exist that enables it to overcome so work can continue without worries. So manipulation can continue without worries. Can you imagine if some foundation or independent wealthy person put half the energy into me that they put into confusing you and manipulating, deceiving, coercing you? We would have already won this battle a long time ago. All we got to do is wake this population up. We win. I don't know what we're going to win. We ain't got much of a future left, but at least we got something. Right now, we are in real trouble. We're losing the battle on a big scale. All the species are disappearing. We need to go to war. The Chief Cabinet Secretary said the measures of various government ministries will be implemented to ensure the efforts are sustainable. Fukushima nuclear water will be released via undersea tunnel 1 kilometer away. Japan's electric company released Fukushima contaminated water offshore through undersea tunnel. This is incredible. And I was wondering how they were going to try to pull this off, right? The tanks are empty. So undersea tunnel, how are you going to prove anything? How are you going to prove? It's a brilliant plan. Oh, we'll just get an undersea tunnel. Look, here's the plutonium fallout over North America. Plutonium-239 dispersals based upon documentation from TEPCO covering the northern hemisphere with radioactive fallout. And then the lobbyists themselves, the World Nuclear News, which is the World Nuclear Association, who never puts their name on a single story, by the way. Undersea tunnel discharged Fukushima Daiichi water. The tunnel will release the tritiated... Now, calling you're pouring water over a nuclear meltdown. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods is curium. That's why they called it a curium. And curium, again, I remind you, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker for curium isotopes than you do for plutonium, into an area of the ocean away from the plant, but where no fishing rights are in place. Where no fishing rights 1 kilometer away from the plant. And show you the empty tanks. The tanks are there to trick you into thinking they didn't kill the Pacific Ocean. The version of a tritiated water is to manipulate you into thinking that they didn't contaminate the ocean. The radioactive fallout is proof to contaminate the entire food chain throughout the entire planet, and that ground zero Japan has to be avoided at all costs. But on the flip side of it, we got to stop this madness of these lies, this perpetual... Because they told so many lies for 10 years, they can't tell you the truth. They can't do that. You just lied to us for 10 years. What else did you lie about? So they can't tell you the truth ever, because they got to keep the lie alive. And that's where someone like me comes in really well. I got all this experience, all the research, all the expeditions for years and years and years about the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, showing an extinction event. I'm able to provide the documentation. But if I was empowered, I'm just speculating, that if I was empowered and had reasonable funds, I can have crews out on the ocean live streaming back into these shows. For starters. You really think I want to go out on the ocean? I'm an old broken man, for goodness sakes. I can't even sleep anymore because we are not able to fight properly. It's not fair. You got the one person on the planet who's able to go to war, able to articulate what the issues are, able to counter the propaganda, and I have to struggle every second of every day. That's the definition of hell, okay? I live in hell all day, every day. The world doesn't realize it, but in the future, maybe. In the Fukushima Daiichi site, contaminated water is treated by the Advanced Liquid Processing System, ALPS, which, of course, like the Areva system, didn't work. Like, if you go back through my videos, you'll look up tanks. And I covered it all. I've done a whole major presentation on it. The World Nuclear News is a lobbying group. They're nuclear lobbyists. Right? They're ran by the World Nuclear Association. They're lobbyists for the nuclear industry. According to Japan's announced policy, the tritium will be diluted with 1,500 becquerels per liter, which is 1/4 of the concentration permitted under Japanese standards by the capture regulators, and 1/7 of the World Health Organization, which is a corporation. Why is the World Health Organization being invoked into anything? They're a corporation, a subsidy of United Nations, which is a corporation, which was created after Hiroshima and Nagasaki to get a monopoly on nuclear. So inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. Do you think that's just applicable to humans? You really think that insects and birds and spiders and ants and bees and all the species, all the plants and everything are not affected by this? That the bacteria itself in the forest is not eradicated first? And the species can't survive without bacteria, neither can you. So saying tritiated, that this is a model of the xenon releases covering let me play that. Just to give you, make sure you're able to wrap your mind around it. That's the Pacific. And this is the Atlantic, covered in radioactive fallout. I've done here, all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, all the way to Alaska, year after year after year. Total extinction event. We're currently on the east coast down here in all this radioactive fallout. I just come back from an expedition. I got blown out of it. We got brutal rain. Oh, man. The wind was so strong that I physically got sick because of the tent flapping. It physically, after several hours, it made me so sick, I had to go out in the rain. And the temperature dropped down to 10 degrees. It was actually hellish, eh? And then once I was completely disoriented, and I went back and put rope over each compartment of the tent and staked it into the ground to stop the tent from flapping. And I had a headache for about 24 hours because of it. Physically got so sick, I had to go out in the pouring rain. Like, oh my God. But look, the radioactive fallout is an extinction event. So you're not going to, you hear stories how a nuclear war is going to cause the death of the planet and the sky is going to black out and the plants can't grow. That's actually not how it works. That was a study published by two guys, and the world's media and Hollywood ran with it. They still do. But in reality, what happens, because we had nuclear wars, massive nuclear wars already. So the Castle Bravo in the Bikini Islands was 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima bomb. So it's equal to two countries like Russia and China firing 500 Nagasaki weapons at each other, nuclear bombs at each other. Is that not a nuclear war? The Soviet Union set off a bomb was equal to 3,800 Hiroshima-sized bombs worth of radiation, which is equal to the United States and India firing 1,900 nuclear weapons at each other. Would that not be a nuclear war? It didn't black out the sky. It covered the planet in radioactive fallout, though. And you can't go anywhere on the planet without the Geiger counter screaming at you. Pre-Fukushima. Now it's gone crazy, right? We already had nuclear wars. We got the documentations. Yeah, everybody's... terrible. Let's keep going here. By the way, radioactive fallout is forever. The radiation doesn't go away. This is not like smoke from a forest fire. This is radioactive fallout. You got radioactive pollen all the time. This is liberated constantly with forest fires. It's brought back to the surface through the plants sucking up the radiation with their nutrition. I don't know why anybody's worried about me. I only got 30 people on my show. Like Tokyo, with 29 million becquerels a square meter in the soil after a single rainfall. That's not going to go away tomorrow or next day or next year or the year after or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 100 years or 100,000 years. And some people think that, say, because that story is 2011. Somebody, like, that's 2011. Yeah, so what? It happened in 2011, stupid. You really think that's gone away? You really think that's decayed? Morons. They're trying to manipulate you. That's the evidence. This doesn't matter if it was Chernobyl 35 years ago. The evidence is the evidence. Nuclear is forever. It's not a temporary thing. It helps treated water be diluted using seawater from outside the plant's harbor to avoid the impact of the radioactive material in the harbor, according to the nuclear lobby group called World Nuclear News. According to the plan released by TEPCO, the diluted water will then be discharged via an undersea tunnel dug through the bedrock to prevent discharged water from... Listen. If you're just joining the show, go back and watch the whole show later, and then you'll understand these are actually evil scumbag nuclear apologists that write that stuff. These are degenerate monsters. The tunnel is 2.5 meters in diameter, 1 kilometer in length, and lying 12 meters below the sea level. Like, there's no way to prove the tanks are full because you won't let anybody independently look. And if the tanks are full of this radioactive water that was poured over a reactor core, you can't get close enough to it to build another tank, let alone look inside of it. And so the fact that there's other tanks there is proof that the tanks are empty. Fukushima radioactive wastewater to be dumped into the ocean through a tunnel. So what I'm showing you was that all the media, tunnel envisioned to release into the ocean, all the media jumped on this to manipulate you. They all came out, Mari Yamaguchi. The majority of them came out and regurgitated Mari Yamaguchi. The idea was, if they all come out with the same pictures, or at least the same headlines, same version, the same paragraphs, at the same time, you can't have a real conversation because you didn't see my video to get the rest of the documentation. So when they come out and they give you the song and the dance, you better start worrying. Fukushima nuclear water to be released. Undersea tunnel to drain Fukushima into the ocean. Ministers have said that the release should be safe because the water is to be processed to remove almost all radioactive elements. It actually doesn't work that way. You can't actually do that. Water used for cooling the plant, for God's sakes. You're pouring water over a nuclear meltdown and you think you can dilute that. Then you're delusional. You're just not aware of the facts. If you watch the whole presentation tonight, go back and watch the presentation on the tanks that I done several weeks ago. Is the missing piece to this story at night. See, the problem with telling this story is there's so many facets. And if you're not aware of some of the facets, if you're aware of some of the facets, then you can extrapolate a lot on your own. So that's why I do what I do. I provide so much documentation that if you watch it for a couple of episodes or a week, you should be able to extrapolate all kinds of things on your own accurately after. So I appeal to policymakers and the investors of the industry and countries that are thinking about nuclear, if they watch my presentations and they're reasonable, they're going to turn around and walk away. So claiming that the plant was crippled, the nuclear plants were crippled. Like every time I see that word, I want to go beat the shit out of somebody. Does that look like it's crippled? That's reactor 4 in Japan. It's gone. Reactor cores, were, by the way, for decades were stored at the top of the buildings. The reactor itself is at the top of the buildings. There is no top to the building. It's gone. There's 4 reactors that done the same thing. They're gone, completely gone. Each of Japan's reactors were 800 tons of pure uranium, pure plutonium. Chernobyl was 200 tons. It was a brand new reactor. It didn't have any fuel pools at the top of the buildings. With 4 decades of reactor cores, it's brand new. Chernobyl had a graphite moderator, which means it has very little uranium plutonium compared to Fukushima, which is pure uranium, pure plutonium. And the Fukushima reactor 3 was the mixed oxide fuel building, for goodness sakes, which is 1 billion times worse than a normal meltdown. TEPCO, which is nationalized, is said is ready to pay compensation for reputational damage. Hush money. TEPCO also said it would accept inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. It took you bloody time. Why'd you wait 10 years? Because they didn't want to be there. They won't go there. They're not going there now. They're never going to go there. The filtration process removes most of the radioactive elements from the water, but some remains, including tritium. This is Taipei Times. Now, Taiwan, after Fukushima, because Taiwan has big universities for nuclear, they had 2,000 students spam the internet for several years. Students were spamming the internet, telling people in comment sections of all the stories and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and everywhere else that Fukushima radiation was harmless. Great, that was a study that came out several years ago. We covered it. Unfortunately, it took down my site a few weeks ago. I provide the documentation, for God's sakes. I mean, go jump in the fuel pool. Thanks, Dana. Good call. I mean, I got 30 people on my show. Why are you worried about me, folks? Thank you, everybody. Keep going. We're almost through this, so let's keep going. Japan to release contaminated water from Fukushima into the sea. And explains the ALP can filter 62 kinds of radioactive substances, including cesium. Again, whenever you see cesium, that's how they're manipulating you. Reactors don't run on cesium, they run on plutonium, uranium, and the biggest byproduct of a nuclear meltdown is curium isotopes, not cesium or iodines. 75 years of manipulation, right? However, the contaminated water will still contain substances like tritium even after it's processed by ALPS. And if you look at filtration, as I explained earlier in the show, the filtration system, you know that's a complete fable. Undersea tunnel to release Fukushima water, Mari Yamaguchi. And when you actually count the tanks at the site, there's not 1,000 tanks, or even close to it. At best, it's 650 tanks. And if you read that story, there's a link below. A thumbs down for Durnford, which is me, is a grotesque attack on environmentalism. And they convicted me in 2016 and gave me gag orders, and then they smeared me in 1,500 newspapers worldwide. Well, I done nothing wrong. And I'm not going away because I done nothing wrong. I go to war every fucking day. Every day. And I don't regret a second of it. I'll do it again in a heartbeat. I'm not a bad person for being honest. And anybody that tries to claim I'm a bad person for being honest are a monster. You're a degenerate scumbag and a coward and human trash. And at some point, the world will hold you accountable, I can guarantee you. I'm doing what got to get done. This is not a game. This is an extinction event. We have the moral high ground. And I didn't want to do a show tonight because I'm burnt out. I'm burnt out. But we got to do a show. We got no choice. We got to fight back. We got to push forward. No matter how sick and miserable I am, we still got to go to war every single day. If the weather's good, I'm going on the ocean tomorrow. The forecast changes every 24 hours. And I'm going to go out in the ocean, look for birds and any other species. I want to lug the boat down to Bacalou Island. There's supposed to be 6.6 million storm petrels down there. We went down there last year 4 times. I got to leave like 2:30 in the morning to do it. It's got to be in the dark. I got to be out there on my spot in the dark, and I can't go with an engine that only works half of what it's supposed to do. The idea of that boat is, in bad weather, I can speed up and get into safety before I get caught in the North Atlantic hell, right? If I can't do that, I can get caught in bad weather. I can't take the chance, right? And then my kicker is not, I don't have the kicker pumping water. I have the kit, though, to rebuild the fuel pump or the water pump. I still got to get that done. We are struggling. And I'm doing the best I can. And I've taken so many chances this year already. There's certain things I can't take a chance on because it's too dangerous. But it's not right that I can't do the research. It's lunatic that I can't do the research. It's absurd that there's no foundation supporting me. It's absurd. It's humiliating that there's any foundations on the planet supporting all kinds of garbage, but we can't get anybody to support something genuine and sincere and honest. I've been doing this for years. I'm not some random person, okay? And everybody that knows me knows that about me. I'm just saying to those that don't, I'm not some random person. I've been at this a very long time. It's not a game. Wow. So why are they so desperately attacking me tonight? I wonder what's up with that. There's 3 attacks in a row. Probably more that I never noticed. Okay, well, that was a difficult show tonight because it's such a complicated topic, right? But if you watch the whole presentation, you are well educated. If you're honest and sincere and genuine, you watch this whole presentation, you are friggin' the best educated person on the planet on this subject. There are the people that watches this presentation. By far, you're the best informed people on this planet. And you know it. You know it. That's why you're here, right? And you know what I'm saying is true because I provide the documentation, always. Which means I have to work at least 10 to 20 times harder than anybody else. And I can't educate you without providing the documentation. But Yoshi Shimatsu is the ex-editor of the Japan Times who came out to defend me after I was arrested. And if you go read the last paragraph of that story, you'll find out what he thinks of me. And he's accurate. I'm not blowing my own whistle. I'm just saying he got it. He understood. He followed my expeditions. We actually done radio shows for 2 years together each Sunday. And he knows that I'm as honest as my day is long. And my days are very long. I'm going to come and say goodnight to everybody. Yeah, they killed my channel with 1,600 presentations. Timeless Truth, you're welcome. AA, James Lucid. Hey, buddy. Timo. Good night, everybody. Dana Nasana. Jesus, my heart goes out to you, my friend. I hope that your girlfriend and that community get some quick relief. That's horrible. That's horrible fire down there is just it's heartbreaking. It really is. I'll come in and say goodnight to everybody I can find here. Steve Edwards. Chuck. Hi, Chuck. I only serve one king. Yeah, good night. Thank you. Andrew B is here. CFINSTR is his handle. I'm just going to look for a couple of names that I might have missed here. Jerry Goldstein. Good night, Jerry. Colette S. Good night, Colette. Thank you again, honey. She donated another 125 when I left on the last expedition. So I got that money. Thank you, by the way. That was the only extra donation that I got. And so that definitely helped. And the gas I got left over, I'm going to put in the boat. Fukushima Revelations. Amy Howard. Hi, Amy. Chad. Good night, everybody. God bless. Hugs for everybody. Nara Yaloft, you're welcome. I guess I'll be back tomorrow night. I'm going to try to get on the ocean tomorrow. I'm so burnt out. I would love to take a couple days off, but we're losing the planet. We got to go to war. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. We got 22 thumbs up. Let me check and see how many thumbs I got down first. Sure, that's a big one. There are links below to donate. Send me out to all the foundations out there. Let me go to war for you and this planet. Got 4 thumbs down for being honest. Wow. It's all good. That's the price you gotta pay, right? I always accept that I'm going to be vilified and demonized for being honest. That's just the coward's way. They got to do that because they can't look in the mirror at themselves. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We're going to cover Hurricane Ida and other important nuclear news. Unless something shows up that's more important. We got to keep the pushback anyway, and the pressure on them. Good night, everybody. God bless. Have a great night. Hugs for everyone. Take care, folks.